I hadn't planned to visit my son's house on Thanksgiving Day. In fact, I thought I would just spend the holiday quietly at home. But something in my heart told me to get in my car and drive over. Maybe it was a grandfather's intuition, or maybe it was fate. Whatever it was, I'm glad I listened. The air was sharp and biting, only 5 degrees above zero. My breath came out in white clouds as I pulled into their neighborhood. The streets were eerily quiet, except for the occasional crunch of ice under my tires. Families were inside, celebrating, sharing warmth, laughter, and food. But what I saw as I parked my car froze my blood. There, on the sidewalk in front of my son's house, was my grandson. He was shivering violently, dressed only in a thin t-shirt and shorts, his skin turning red from the cold. His tiny hands were rubbed raw as he tried to keep himself warm. My heart nearly stopped. I rushed to him, throwing my coat around his shoulders. "Ethan, what on earth are you doing out here?" I asked, but his lips were trembling so hard he couldn't even form words. His eyes filled with tears as he pointed weakly toward the house. I looked up at the warmly lit windows, the glow of candles and the shadowy figures moving inside. I could even hear faint laughter and the clinking of glasses. My entire family, my son, his wife, their relatives, were inside, sitting around the table, feasting on turkey and pumpkin pie, while this child was left outside in the freezing dark. A surge of anger and disbelief boiled inside me. I lifted Ethan into my arms and stormed toward the house. My boots pounded against the frozen ground, each step fueled by the fire in my chest. When I reached the door, I didn't bother knocking. I shoved it open so hard that it slammed against the wall. The sound silenced the room instantly. Everyone turned to stare. Forks and knives frozen in midair. Glasses hovered above lips. Their laughter died on their tongues. I stood there, my grandson trembling in my arms, his lips blue, his small body pressed against mine for warmth. My eyes locked on my son's. Shock washed across his face, then guilt, then something darker, fear. And that's when I said 6 words that made their faces go white. Why was he left outside alone? The silence was heavier than any words. The room was frozen in silence. Every eye in the dining room stared at me as though I were a ghost. My son's wife, Laura, slowly put her fork down, her face pale. My son, Mark, pushed back his chair, his expression torn between anger and shame. The warm, festive glow of the Thanksgiving candles now felt like a spotlight exposing the ugliest truth. "Dad, you don't understand," Mark stammered. His voice cracked, and he couldn't even look me in the eye. "I don't understand," I thundered, my voice echoing through the room. I pulled Ethan closer against my chest. This boy, this precious child, was outside in the freezing cold, shivering, while all of you sat here stuffing your mouths with turkey and laughing. Tell me, Mark, tell me how in God's name that makes any sense." Laura glanced nervously at the other guests, who shifted uncomfortably in their seats. No one dared to speak. My grandson clung to me, his tears soaking into my coat. His little voice finally broke through the silence. "Grandpa, they locked me out." The words hit me harder than a punch. My chest tightened, and rage filled my veins like fire. I looked at Mark, waiting for him to deny it, to explain it away somehow. But he didn't. He only lowered his head into his hands. "Why? Why would you do such a cruel thing to your own son?" Mark slammed his fist onto the table, making the plates rattle. "He spilled cranberry sauce all over the rug. He broke a glass, and he wouldn't stop crying. We just needed peace for once." I couldn't believe what I was hearing.
Peace? You call this peace? Abandoning a child in the freezing cold while you feast inside like kings? That's not peace, Mark. That's cruelty. That's neglect. Laura tried to intervene, her voice trembling. It wasn't supposed to be for long. We thought maybe the fresh air would calm him down. We didn't mean for him to stay out there so long. I cut her off, my words sharp as knives. 5 degrees. 5 degrees. Do you have any idea how quickly a child can freeze in weather like that? 15 minutes, maybe less. You could have lost him forever tonight. And all because of a stained rug and a broken glass? Shame on you, Laura. Shame on both of you. The guests at the table, Laura's parents, her sister, and a couple of neighbors, shifted awkwardly, avoiding eye contact. Some looked horrified, others embarrassed, but no one dared to speak against me. Ethan buried his face in my chest, sobbing quietly. I stroked his hair, feeling his tiny body trembling not only from the cold, but from the fear of his own parents. I stood taller, letting my anger turn into resolve. From this moment on, this child is not spending another night under this roof if I have anything to say about it. He deserves warmth, love, and safety, not punishment for being a child. Mark's eyes finally met mine, burning with frustration, but also something else, fear of losing control. Dad, you can't just take him. He's my son. I stared back without blinking. Then start acting like a father, because right now you're nothing but a stranger to me. The weight of those words seemed to crush the room. Laura covered her mouth with her hand, tears welling in her eyes. Mark's jaw clenched, but he said nothing more. I turned to the others at the table, my voice rising again. You all sat here and watched. Not one of you opened the door for him. Not one of you cared enough to bring him in. Remember this moment, because I will never forget it. The silence stretched on, heavy and suffocating. The only sound was Ethan's shaky breathing against my chest. I carried him toward the door, ready to walk out into the freezing night, but this time I would not let him face it alone. And as I reached for the doorknob, I heard Laura whisper through her tears, "Please, don't take him away."
Laura's whisper hung in the air like smoke, fragile, trembling, desperate. "Please, don't take him away." I froze at the door, Ethan clinging to me like I was the only safe place left in his world. His tiny hands gripped my shirt, refusing to let go. My heart broke at the thought of leaving him in this house another minute, let alone another night. I turned slowly to face them all. Do you even hear yourselves? Do you realize what you've done? You locked your own child out of his home in deadly weather just so you could eat dinner in peace? Laura broke into sobs, covering her face with her hands. Mark stood rigid, his fists clenched, his jaw tight. His pride was fighting with the reality of his actions, but deep down, even he knew the truth. "You want me to leave him here?" I said, my voice low but sharp. "Then you look me in the eye, Mark. Look me in the eye and tell me your son is safe in this house. Tell me you'll never do this again." Mark's eyes darted away, and that silence was louder than any confession. He had no defense. The guests shifted in their chairs, whispering among themselves. Laura's mother spoke up at last, her voice weak. Maybe your father's right, Mark. Ethan could have frozen." Mark shot her a glare, but she shrank back into her seat. Even the guests could no longer stomach the truth. I walked back into the living room, still holding Ethan. His head rested on my shoulder, his breaths shallow but slowing as the warmth returned to his body. I gently rubbed his back. "It's okay, son. Grandpa's here now. No one's going to hurt you again." I laid him down on the couch, wrapped in my coat. His eyelids fluttered, heavy with exhaustion. I kissed his forehead and stood up, my fury returning like a storm. "Mark,"
I said firmly. You nearly killed your son tonight. Do you understand that? Children don't just bounce back from cold like this. Hypothermia sets in fast. If I hadn't shown up, if fate hadn't led me here, Ethan might not be breathing right now. Laura sobbed harder, whispering, I didn't think. That's the problem. You didn't think. None of you did. Mark finally erupted, slamming his hand against the wall. I've had enough, Dad. You've always judged me, always treated me like I'm not good enough. He's my father, not you. You don't get to come into my house and tell me how to raise my son. I stepped forward, unflinching. Then prove it. A father protects his child, loves his child, sacrifices for his child. What you did tonight, what you allowed to happen, is the opposite of fatherhood. You don't deserve that title until you change. The words hit him like stones. His face twisted with anger, but his eyes glistened, betraying the shame buried underneath. For a moment, I saw my little boy again, the one I raised, the one who once looked to me for guidance. But now he was a man broken by his pride, blinded by his failures. I lowered my voice, softer but firm. Mark, this isn't about me versus you. This is about Ethan. He needs love. He needs warmth. He needs to know he's safe in his own home. And if you can't give him that, then I will. The room was dead silent. Every guest seemed frozen in place, afraid to breathe. The only sound was the faint ticking of the clock on the wall. Finally, Laura stepped forward, tears streaming down her face. He's right, Mark. We went too far. I don't know what came over us. I don't want Ethan to grow up fearing us. I don't want him to hate us. Mark's shoulders sagged, his fists loosened. He turned to look at Ethan, small and fragile under my coat on the couch. His face crumbled, guilt pouring over him like a tidal wave. I didn't mean to hurt him, he whispered, his voice breaking. I lost control. I didn't know how to handle it. I placed a hand on his shoulder, firm but not harsh. Then learn, son. Being a father isn't about control. It's about patience, compassion, and love. You can't lock your problems out in the cold. You face them. You nurture them. That's what it means to be a man. That's what it means to be a father. Mark sank into a chair, burying his face in his hands. For the first time that night, he didn't fight back. He didn't argue. He just sat there broken, realizing the weight of what he'd done. I turned to the rest of the table. This dinner is over. There will be no celebration here tonight, not until this family remembers what Thanksgiving truly means. Gratitude, love, family, and above all, protecting the ones who can't protect themselves. Nobody argued. Nobody moved. The feast that once looked so grand now seemed like nothing more than a hollow display. I returned to Ethan's side, brushing a strand of hair from his forehead. His small hand reached out in his sleep and wrapped around my finger. That tiny gesture gave me all the strength I needed. I made a silent vow then and there. No matter what happened, I would never let this boy suffer like that again. And though the night had grown colder outside, a different kind of chill filled the house. The chill of truth, the kind that leaves a mark forever.
The house was silent, except for the faint crackling of the fireplace. Ethan slept on the couch, wrapped in my coat, his breathing steady now. I kept glancing at him, making sure his little chest rose and fell. Every breath was a reminder of how close this night had come to disaster. Mark sat hunched over at the table, his face hidden in his hands. Laura stood beside him, tears streaking her cheeks. The guests shifted uneasily, some whispering excuses about leaving, but no one dared to actually move.
The weight of what had happened held them all in place like chains. I broke the silence first. "You know," I said slowly, my voice heavy with memory, "this isn't the first time I've seen a child left out in the cold." Mark lifted his head, confused. "What are you talking about?" I sighed, my eyes distant. "You were 6 years old. One winter, your mother and I had a terrible fight. She was so angry, she locked you outside on the porch for 5 minutes. 5 minutes! I was at work, and when I came home and saw you crying, your hands purple from the cold, I swore that day it would never happen again. I fought with her, and I told her no matter what mistakes you made, no matter how hard things got, we would never shut you out again." Mark's eyes widened. I don't remember that." "You wouldn't," I said softly. "Children forget, but fathers don't. That memory stayed with me all these years. And tonight, seeing Ethan outside like that, it was like history repeating itself. Only this time, it was my son doing the locking." Mark winced, as though I had struck him. His lips trembled, but no words came. He looked at Ethan, then back at me, and I saw the shame cut deep into him. Laura knelt beside Mark, placing her hand on his arm. "We can't undo tonight," she whispered, "but maybe we can learn from it." I nodded. "That's the only way forward. You've made a mistake so big it could have cost your son his life. But if you face it, own it, and change, Ethan can still grow up in a home filled with love instead of fear." Mark's voice was barely audible. "I don't know if I can be that kind of father." "You can," I said firmly, "because I raised you to be better than this. I know you've lost your temper. I know life has been hard, bills piling up, the pressure of work, the fights with Laura, but none of that gives you the right to take it out on him. You think you're too weak? Then lean on me. Lean on the people who love you. That's what family is supposed to be." For the first time, Mark's tears fell. He tried to hide them, but it was too late. The dam had broken. He pressed his palms against his face, his shoulders shaking. "I'm sorry. God, I'm so sorry." Laura hugged him, crying too. The sight was raw, broken, but real. I stood there quietly, letting them feel the weight of their guilt. Sometimes silence is more powerful than words. Ethan stirred on the couch, his small voice breaking the moment. "Grandpa, are we going home?" My heart clenched. I walked over and knelt beside him. "You're safe now, Ethan. You're always safe with me. And this house, it will be your home again. But things have to change." Ethan looked at his father, his innocent eyes filled with a mixture of fear and hope. Mark stood slowly, walked over, and knelt in front of his son. His voice trembled. "Ethan, I'm sorry. I'll never leave you outside again. I promise." The boy studied his father for a long moment, then quietly reached out and wrapped his little arms around Mark's neck. It wasn't forgiveness. It was hope. A chance. I watched, my chest tight, my eyes stinging. That hug meant more than any words ever could. But I wasn't ready to let things slide so easily. I stood, my voice steady but firm. Promises are easy. Keeping them is what matters. From this day forward, I'll be checking in. No more hiding. No more pretending everything's fine. If you slip, Mark, if you ever put Ethan in danger again, you'll answer to me, and I'll make sure the law answers too. Do you understand?" Mark nodded quickly, still holding his son. "Yes, Dad, I understand." I turned to Laura. "And you, never be silent again. If you see harm, you stop it. Protecting Ethan isn't just Mark's job, it's yours too." Laura nodded, tears still running down her cheeks. "I swear I'll never let this happen again." For the first time that night, I felt a sliver of relief. Not trust, not yet, but a crack in the wall, a chance for healing. I pulled a chair beside the couch and sat near Ethan. The warmth of the fire spread across the room, and slowly the tension began to melt away. The guests quietly excused themselves, slipping out into the cold night, leaving the four of us behind. The feast sat untouched on the table. No one cared about the turkey anymore. The real Thanksgiving had just begun. Not around food, but around the promise of a better tomorrow.
The clock struck 10. The once celebratory house now felt like a courtroom. Silent, heavy, every word echoing like a verdict. Ethan had drifted back to sleep on the couch, still wrapped in my coat. His little hand clutched the fabric tightly, as if letting go would mean the cold might come back. I sat near him, refusing to move, my eyes fixed on the boy I almost lost tonight. Mark and Laura sat together across the room, their faces pale, their eyes swollen from crying. For the first time in years, I saw them not as a couple who had everything under control, but as two people desperately aware of how far they had fallen. Mark cleared his throat, his voice barely audible. "Dad, you don't know what it's been like. The stress, the bills, Ethan crying at night, refusing to eat his meals, throwing tantrums. Sometimes it feels like he does it on purpose, like he wants to push us to the edge." I shook my head slowly. "He's a child, Mark. Children don't scheme against their parents. They act out because they're scared, confused, or in need of love. Do you think he's crying at night to torture you? No. He's crying because he needs comfort. He needs you." Laura's voice broke. "We've been so focused on everything going wrong, the money, the arguments, our pride, we stopped seeing him. We treated him like a problem to solve instead of our son." Her honesty was raw, and for a moment, I saw the young woman I had once welcomed into our family, full of hope, wanting only the best for her child. Somewhere along the way, she had lost that light. I leaned forward, my tone softening. "You both need to listen to me. I know parenting feels like the heaviest burden in the world sometimes. But Ethan didn't ask to be born into your struggles. He didn't choose this. You chose to bring him into the world, and with that choice comes the responsibility to protect him no matter what." Mark lowered his head, his shoulders trembling. He whispered, "I'm scared I'll fail him again." Failure isn't falling down, it's refusing to get back up. Tonight, you nearly made the biggest mistake of your life. But if you face it, if you learn from it, then this night can be the moment that saves your family instead of destroying it. Laura reached for Mark's hand. For the first time that night, he didn't pull away. Their fingers intertwined, fragile but real. The fire crackled, filling the silence with warmth. I stood and walked to the window. Outside, snow had begun to fall, blanketing the street in white. The world looked so pure, so clean, untouched by the chaos inside. For a moment, I wish I could wipe away tonight's pain as easily as the snow covered the ground. Then, Ethan stirred again, his small voice breaking through the stillness. "Grandpa, are you staying?" I turned quickly, kneeling beside him. "Yes, Ethan, I'm not going anywhere tonight." He gave a sleepy smile and nestled deeper into the coat. That single smile reminded me why I had come, why I couldn't give up on this family, no matter how broken it seemed. I looked back at Mark and Laura. You two need to understand something. Tonight was your wake-up call. If you don't change, if you don't put Ethan first from this moment on, then I will step in and you will lose him. I won't stand by while my grandson suffers." Mark swallowed hard, his voice trembling. "Then help us, Dad. Teach me. Show me how to be the kind of father you wanted me to be." Those words, humble, desperate, cut through years of pride and stubbornness. I saw the boy I once held, the boy who used to run into my arms after school, the boy who looked up to me like a hero. That boy was still there, buried under mistakes, waiting to come out. I nodded slowly. I'll help, but it won't be easy. You'll need patience, discipline, sacrifice, and most of all, love. Every day. Even when you're tired, even when you're angry, especially then. Laura whispered, "We'll try. We have to." I placed my hand on Ethan's small back. "For his sake, you must." The night dragged on, heavy but healing. No one touched the food on the table. No one cared about the holiday anymore. Instead, we sat together in the dim light of the fire, each of us lost in our thoughts. For the first time, silence wasn't suffocating. It was necessary. As midnight approached, I leaned back in my chair, watching Ethan sleep peacefully. My heart ached, but it also carried a fragile hope. Maybe tonight could be the turning point. Maybe this family still had a chance. But deep down, I knew the road ahead would not be easy. The first light of dawn crept through the curtains, painting the living room in pale gold. I hadn't slept a single minute. My eyes were heavy, but my heart wouldn't let me rest. I had spent the whole night in that armchair, watching Ethan sleep soundly on the couch, guarding him like a soldier on duty. Mark and Laura had dozed off at the dining table, their heads resting against each other. The untouched turkey still sat on the table, cold and forgotten, a monument to a Thanksgiving that had gone so terribly wrong. When Ethan stirred and opened his eyes, the first thing he saw was me. He blinked, then smiled weakly. "Morning, Grandpa." I leaned forward, brushing his hair back from his forehead. "Morning, champ. Did you sleep well?" He nodded. "Better, 'cause you were here." Those words nearly broke me. A child shouldn't have to measure his peace by whether his grandfather stayed overnight to protect him from his own parents. My jaw tightened as I swallowed the lump in my throat. Mark woke next, rubbing his eyes. He froze when he saw me still sitting there, then glanced at Ethan. His face softened, almost in disbelief that his son was safe and warm. "Dad," Mark whispered, his voice hoarse from exhaustion. "Thank you for staying." I stood, stretching the stiffness from my back. "I didn't stay for you, Mark. I stayed for him. But if you truly mean what you said last night, if you want to change, then this is where it begins, not in promises, but in actions." Laura woke and joined us, her face pale but determined. "We talked while you were dozing off," she said quietly. "Mark and I, we want help, real help. Counseling, parenting classes, whatever it takes. We don't want to ever feel that desperation again, and we don't want Ethan to pay for our mistakes." For a moment, I studied their faces. There was fear there, yes, but also sincerity, a crack of light through the darkness. "Good," I said firmly, "but understand me, I'll hold you accountable. This isn't something you fix in a day. It'll take months, maybe years, but every day you'll have a choice to be better parents or to fall back into your old ways." Mark nodded quickly. "We'll try. No, we will do it." I placed a hand on his shoulder. "I'll believe it when I see it, but for Ethan's sake, I hope you mean it." Ethan sat up, his little voice piping in. "Does that mean I don't have to be scared anymore?" We all turned to him. His words were soft, but they cut through the room like thunder. Laura knelt in front of him, tears brimming in her eyes.
No, sweetheart, you don't ever have to be scared again. Mommy's here, Daddy's here, and we'll do better. We promise. Mark swallowed hard, then added, I made a mistake, Ethan, a big one, but I love you more than anything in this world. I'm going to show you that every single day. Ethan looked between them, then to me as if searching for confirmation. I gave him a small nod. They're trying, son, and I'll be here too. You're not alone. The boy smiled faintly, and for the first time in a long while, the fear in his eyes began to fade. I stood and walked to the window. The snow from last night now blanketed the street, glittering in the morning sun. Neighbors were shoveling their driveways. Kids were laughing as they built snowmen. Life moved on outside, but inside this house, life had just paused for a reckoning. I turned back to them. Thanksgiving isn't about turkey or pie. It's about gratitude, about seeing what you have and holding it close. Last night, you nearly lost the most precious gift of all. Don't ever forget that. Mark and Laura both nodded, tears streaming silently down their cheeks. As Ethan curled against me once more, I knew this family had a long road ahead. There would be setbacks, there would be fights, but there was also a chance, a fragile golden chance, that love could win. And I promised myself I would be there every step of the way, making sure no door ever closed on Ethan again.
The following week, the snow kept falling. Christmas lights were already going up in the neighborhood, but inside Mark and Laura's house, the atmosphere was still heavy. There was effort, yes, they were trying, but the scars of that Thanksgiving night hadn't disappeared. I visited every day, checking on Ethan. I watched as Mark helped him with homework, as Laura cooked simple meals, trying to smile through her exhaustion. But sometimes I caught the shadows on their faces, the guilt, the doubt, the quiet tension that still lingered. One Saturday morning, just as I was sipping coffee in my own kitchen, the doorbell rang. I opened it to find a woman standing there, wrapped in a long coat, her breath visible in the cold air. She looked around 40, with sharp eyes that studied me carefully. "Mr. Harris?" she asked. "Yes," I said cautiously. "Can I help you?" She extended her hand. "My name is Detective Collins. I'm from Child Protective Services." My stomach dropped. "Child Protective Services?" She nodded. "We received an anonymous call about possible neglect of a child. I need to ask you a few questions about your grandson, Ethan." The mug in my hand nearly slipped. Someone had reported them. "Come in," I said slowly, stepping aside. She walked in, her eyes scanning my modest home as though already forming judgments. "Do you know if Ethan has been left outside alone for extended periods of time?" I froze. My heart pounded. Whoever made that call, maybe a neighbor who had seen Ethan shivering outside that night, wasn't lying. But this could destroy Mark and Laura if it wasn't handled carefully. I cleared my throat. "Yes," I admitted. "On Thanksgiving. I found him outside, cold, while the rest of the family was eating." Detective Collins scribbled notes. "And how often does this happen?" I hesitated. One part of me wanted to protect my son and his wife. The other part, the stronger part, knew that I had to protect Ethan above all else. I said, finally, "Enough times that it worries me. But I also believe his parents are trying to change. I've been visiting daily to make sure." She studied me for a long moment, then asked, "Would you be willing to take temporary custody of Ethan if it's deemed unsafe for him to remain with his parents?" The question hit me like a blow. Temporary custody? My hands trembled slightly as I set down the mug. "If it came to that," I said firmly, "yes, without hesitation." She nodded, jotting it down. "I'll be visiting Mark and Laura next. Thank you for your honesty, Mr. Harris."
After she left, I sank into my chair, my head in my hands. I had just set something in motion that could shatter my son's family, or save it. That afternoon, when I went to check on Ethan, I found Mark pacing the living room, his face pale with fury. Laura sat on the couch holding Ethan tightly. "Dad," Mark snapped the moment I entered, "why didn't you tell us CPS came to your door? They're threatening to take Ethan away." I closed the door calmly, because I needed to see how serious you are about changing, and now you'll have to prove it not just to me, but to the state. Mark's fists clenched. "You betrayed us." "No," I said quietly, "I protected your son." The silence that followed was deafening. Ethan looked between us, fear in his eyes. I knelt in front of him, softening my voice. "Listen, champ, no matter what happens, you'll be safe. That's my promise to you." Laura broke down in tears. "We don't want to lose him," she whispered. "Please, Dad, help us fix this." I looked at them both, weighing the moment. They were desperate, shaken, and terrified. Maybe that was exactly what they needed. "Then listen to me carefully," I said, my voice firm but steady. "This isn't the end, it's the beginning. You'll attend counseling, you'll work with social services, and you'll prove, day after day, that Ethan is your priority. Or else," I paused, letting the weight of the words sink in, "or else he stays with me." Mark swallowed hard, his anger crumbling into fear. Laura nodded frantically. Ethan whispered, "I just want us to be together but safe." And in that moment, I realized the fight for this family's soul had only just begun. The morning light was cold, but brought a sense of hope. I knew today would be the first real test for Mark and Laura. Ethan was still asleep, clutching my finger tightly, a silent reminder that his safety depended on us. I was determined to ensure he would never face neglect again. Mark and Laura sat at the dining table, their eyes occasionally meeting as if the weight of last night's mistakes still pressed upon them. I took a deep breath. "Mark, Laura, today begins your proof. You can say I'll try, but now you have to show it. Every action, every choice, from now on, must be for Ethan. Do you understand?" Mark nodded, though I could still see some resistance in his eyes. Laura was silent, but determined. Ethan stirred, breaking the tension. "Grandpa, are you staying today?" I sat beside him. "Yes, I'm here. But today you'll see your parents trying. They need to prove it, not to me, but to you, that they can be the parents you deserve." Mark stood silently, looking at Ethan with shame and worry. I knew this was a crucial moment. He was learning what it meant to truly take responsibility for his child. Laura opened a notebook. We'll write down every day what we did for Ethan. This is our accountability," she said softly but firmly. I smiled faintly. "Good, but remember, writing isn't enough. You must act. You must feel it. You must show it." Mark lowered his head. "I know, Grandpa. I made mistakes, but I will try." I placed a hand on his shoulder. "Then begin. Small steps matter. Every safe, happy moment for Ethan is your proof." The day went on. I watched Mark and Laura carefully plan small routines, homework, meals, playtime with Ethan. I stayed nearby, observing, making sure their efforts were sincere. By evening, I noticed a change in Ethan's eyes. Fear had lessened. Hope was growing. "Grandpa, they hugged me today. They didn't get angry once," he whispered. My heart softened. These were small moments, but their impact was enormous. Mark and Laura were truly trying, for their child, for their family. That night we all sat by the fireplace. I was next to Ethan, Mark and Laura across from us. I knew the road ahead would be difficult, but tonight marked the beginning of a small, meaningful change. As Ethan fell asleep, holding my hand, he whispered, "Grandpa, thank you for not leaving me." I smiled softly. "I will never leave you. Your safety is my responsibility. Always." The fireplace cast a warm, gentle glow. Outside, the night was cold and quiet, but inside, a fragile hope and a new beginning filled the room.
The next morning, I arrived at Mark and Laura's house early. The streets were still blanketed in snow, quiet and almost eerily peaceful. But inside, I knew the tension of last week's Thanksgiving could flare up at any moment. Today wasn't just another day. It was the first real test of whether they were truly committed to change. Ethan was waiting by the door, rubbing his eyes. "Grandpa, are they ready?" he asked softly. "I'll find out," I said, kneeling to his level. "But remember, today is about showing love and patience. You're going to watch them try, and you'll help too." Mark appeared in the kitchen, looking nervous. "Dad, I don't know if I can handle today," he admitted, voice trembling. I studied him closely. "Mark, you'll never feel completely ready. Parenting isn't about feeling ready. It's about doing the right thing, even when you're scared or exhausted." Laura came in with breakfast for Ethan, placing a plate carefully in front of him. Her hands shook slightly, betraying her nerves. I want to do better," she said, quietly. I nodded. Actions matter more than words. Every choice today is a test. How you respond to frustration, how you show patience, and how you protect Ethan. This is where you prove yourselves. By mid-morning, small challenges began. Ethan refused to eat his breakfast at first, pushing the plate away. Mark's first reaction was frustration, his jaw tight. But then Laura intervened calmly, kneeling beside him, speaking softly, and helping him take a few bites. I watched carefully. When Mark saw Laura's patience, he mimicked it, softening his tone instead of shouting. It was a small victory, but a victory nonetheless. Later, while Ethan played with blocks, he knocked over a small tower, sending pieces scattering across the floor. Mark's old instinct was to raise his voice. I placed a hand on his shoulder. "Stop. Take a breath. This is a moment to show love, not anger." Mark paused, inhaled deeply, and then knelt, helping Ethan rebuild the tower. Ethan's eyes lit up, and for a moment, Mark's own tension seemed to melt. Lunch arrived with more small trials, arguments over which sandwich to eat, spilled milk, toys left on the floor. Each time I silently observed, stepping in only when patience faltered. Slowly, both Mark and Laura began to act differently. Instead of frustration, they practiced listening, guiding, and gently correcting. By late afternoon, Ethan came to me, smiling. "Grandpa, they didn't yell today, not even once." My heart swelled. "That's because you were patient too, champ. You helped them practice being better parents." Mark and Laura were exhausted but proud. I could see their relief, but also the weight of responsibility they now fully understood. Change wasn't easy, and the real test was that it had to be consistent every day. As evening approached, I stood near the window, watching the sunset reflect on the snow outside. The house felt different than the day before, less tense, more hopeful. A fragile trust was forming, but I knew the next weeks would hold many more tests, and each failure or success would shape the future of this family. Ethan yawned and curled against me. "Grandpa,
Will tomorrow be like today?" I smiled softly. "Tomorrow can be better, Ethan. Every day is a chance to try again, and I'll be here to make sure no one ever hurts you, not even by accident." The fire crackled behind us. Outside, the cold world was the same, but inside, a family was learning to heal, slowly, step by step.
The next few days passed slowly, each one a test of Mark and Laura's commitment. They tried their best. Homework with Ethan, meals, bedtime routines, but old habits are hard to break. I visited daily, quietly observing, sometimes stepping in when patience faltered. One chilly evening, as snow began falling lightly, I arrived to find Ethan still awake. "Grandpa, they're arguing again," he whispered, eyes wide with worry. I sighed, feeling a familiar tension coil in my chest. "Show me," I said, and he led me to the living room. Mark and Laura were standing near the kitchen, voices low but sharp. "You always make it harder than it needs to be," Mark snapped. "I'm trying, Mark," Laura retorted. "I can't fix everything by myself." I stepped forward. My presence immediately halted the argument. "Stop," I said firmly. "Look at each other and listen. This isn't about winning an argument. It's about keeping your child safe and loved." Mark's jaw tightened, but he lowered his gaze. Laura's shoulders shook as she exhaled slowly. We don't want him to see us like this," she whispered. I nodded. "Exactly. This is the real test. Change isn't just about acting right when you're watched. It's about acting right when frustration rises, when the stress hits, when you feel like giving up. That's the difference between a parent and someone who just lives under the same roof as a child." Ethan peeked from the doorway, clutching his blanket. I knelt beside him. "See that, champ? They're learning. Slowly, but they're learning." We spent the rest of the evening calmly resolving the issues. Mark and Laura practiced compromise, taking turns listening and suggesting solutions without anger. By the time bedtime came, Ethan was smiling as he crawled into his small bed. "Grandpa, they hugged me tonight," he whispered. I nodded. "I saw, and tomorrow you'll see them try even harder." Remember, real change is built step by step. As I stepped outside into the cold night, I felt the weight of responsibility heavy on my shoulders. This family had survived Thanksgiving, but the shadow of doubt and old habits would always linger. My job wasn't over. I had to be their guide, their watchdog, their constant reminder of what mattered most: Ethan's safety and love. The snow sparkled under the streetlights, a silent promise that even in the coldest nights, hope can survive if someone is willing to fight for it.
The following week, the house was quieter, but the change was palpable. Mark and Laura had started following the routines consistently: homework, meals, bedtime, and most importantly, patience. Ethan's laughter returned in small doses, filling corners of the house that had felt empty and tense. One evening, as I sat beside the fireplace, watching Ethan build a small fort with blankets, Mark approached me quietly. "Dad, I wanted to thank you," he said softly. "Without your guidance, I don't know what would have happened. I finally understand what it means to be a father." Laura joined us, placing a hand on Mark's shoulder. "We've learned the hard way, but we're ready to keep trying, for Ethan and for us." I nodded, feeling a mix of relief and pride. Remember, it's not about never making mistakes. It's about learning from them and never letting your child suffer because of them. Ethan crawled into my lap, holding my hand tightly. "Grandpa, I'm happy now," he whispered. "You should be," I said, smiling down at him, "and you should always feel safe, loved, and protected." That night we all sat together, Mark, Laura, Ethan, and I, sharing a simple meal. There was no grandeur, no lavish feast, just warmth, love, and a sense of togetherness. For the first time since that terrifying Thanksgiving night, the family felt whole again. As I tucked Ethan into bed later, he whispered, "Grandpa, I love you." "And I love you, champ," I replied, brushing his hair back gently. "And I'll always be here to make sure you're safe, no matter what." Outside, the snow continued to fall quietly, blanketing the world in white. But inside, a family had learned a lesson in love, patience, and responsibility. They had faced darkness, mistakes, and neglect, and had chosen to rise above it. The house was no longer a place of fear, but a home where hope, accountability, and love would guide every day from now on. And I knew, deep in my heart, that this family, fragile yet determined, would never let a child face the cold alone again. The fire crackled warmly as we sat together, a symbol of a family reborn, ready to face the future as one.